Hello and welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep IAS. Before we begin this session of the comprehensive news analysis of the Hindu newspaper, just an important announcement for all of you. If you are looking to avail the BYJU'S IAS courses, there is a golden opportunity for you in terms of the National Scholarship Test presented by BYJU'S. This test gives you a chance to win up to 90% scholarship in all the BYJU'S IAS courses. This online test will be held on 29th of May at 11 a.m. The link to register for this test is given in the description of the video. The deadline to register for this test is 28th of May, 6 p.m. Don't forget to register not just for the scholarship but also to know how prepared are you for this examination. Now let's bring back our focus to today's Hindu newspaper and the important articles that are given in the Hindu newspaper. The first article that we will discuss today is about the abortion debate that is still going on in the country. We have discussed this topic multiple times in the past couple of weeks, ever since there was a draft that got leaked from the US Supreme Court, under which the US Supreme Court judges are looking to ban abortion within the United States. This has brought back the debate for abortion, including India. We discussed about how India passed the Medical Termination of Pregnancy Act in 1971, which was said to be ahead of its time, under which abortion was made legal in India under certain circumstances. This act was recently amended and was made even more liberal. As per the present law, as you know, a woman can opt for abortion till 20 weeks of the pregnancy with the recommendation of just one medical practitioner. Then we have a condition that between 20 to 24 weeks of the pregnancy, if the recommendation has been given by two medical practitioners, pregnancy can be aborted. After 24 weeks, there are certain circumstances under which pregnancy can be aborted, but then it would require the intervention of the judiciary as well. Now, it might seem like a very liberal law, which actually allows the women to choose what happens with their body, but the authors here are trying to make a point that the law was introduced not to give any rights to women. It was actually introduced to safeguard the medical professionals who actually undertake these kind of procedures. It was so that they could not be punished under this scenario that they went ahead and did something against the wishes of the women. This particular law still does not give freedom to the women to choose what happens with their body. Because even till the first scenario of aborting the pregnancy till 20 weeks, you still need to be dependent on the opinion given by the medical practitioner and not a choice of the women as such. Thus, in 1971, when the law was originally introduced, it might have seemed to be a law that was ahead of its time. But if you look at this law from the present context, it does seem like an outdated law because women have not been given the freedom to choose what happens with their body. There are some other loopholes in the law as well. The authors here point out that women, pregnant people, and transgenders in India struggle every single day because of the most basic choices that they have not been allowed to make about their own body. The WHO says that 6 out of 10 of all unintended pregnancies or unplanned pregnancies actually result in an abortion. That is why we need to ensure that there is no stigma around abortion and we have adequate healthcare facilities for women who want to opt for abortion. Because this has not happened, as a result of this, 45% of all the abortions are unsafe. Unsafe because maybe they are not being conducted by trained medical professionals, or unsafe because a lot of times women actually want to do this operation by themselves or on themselves just because they don't want to face the stigma of going to the hospital or letting other people know, because they think that it would be seen as a negative sign on their personality, because of which a lot of complications have developed. So much so that abortions right now account for 10% of all the maternal deaths in India, which is a very, very high number, especially if you compare it with those of the developed nations. This is because abortions in many cases are being done at unhygienic places using incorrect methods by untrained professionals. All this is because the law does not allow the women to freely and openly go to medical practitioners and ask for abortion without being judged. The other loophole in the law, apart from the fact that it depends on the advice given by the medical practitioner, is that it specifically only mentions pregnant women. It ignores the transgender people who might suffer from the same problem and might want to abort the child. but this law is silent on their rights as well. The authors here say that there are multiple issues with regards to abortion laws in India. For example, they have found out that in many cases, especially women who come from the rural areas, are not even aware if abortion is legal in India or not. For these women, if they do become pregnant because of an unplanned pregnancy, for them there is no other option but to carry that child and give birth to the child. So there is a lack of knowledge amongst the women in India. Secondly, it is not the women's choice. As we discussed, at the end of the day, even if it requires only one medical practitioner to allow you to undertake this abortion, it means that it is not the choice of the women. Thirdly, unmarried and transgender peoples face this stigma because they have not been explicitly covered under this law. The other point of contention here is that there is a contradiction between the Medical Termination of Pregnancy Act and the POXO Act, that is Protection of Children from Sexual Offences Act. Because as per this act, any pregnancy of a girl below the age of 18 years has to be reported to the authorities. Now, because of this, it might be an issue that a girl below the age of 18 years wants to abort a child, but her privacy is at risk because it is compulsory for this information to be shared with the authorities. Not just this, it might also happen that in many cases the healthcare professionals themselves have a very strong view against abortion. And let's say when a woman comes to them about abortion, they advise the women or they involve the husband or the fathers in the family to force this woman to give up on this idea. All these problems are because it is still not a matter of choice for the women and they are dependent on the recommendations given by the medical practitioners. Because of this, even though it is illegal in India to determine the gender of the child before he or she is born, but there are still many unregulated ultrasound clinics in India that actually do the same. As a result of which, a lot of female childs are actually aborted just because they are females and not males. That is why, as per the authors, a lot more needs to change if we have to ensure a safer place for women and a society where women have the right to control their own destiny. Now, since we have discussed this topic multiple times in the past, we have also discussed about what changes were introduced in the Medical Termination of Pregnancy Act in 2021. The other thing that I want to bring your focus on is this. In the past few years, a lot of nations have seen a lot of changes in the mindset of the people. See, laws such as abortion are not just about what the parliament decides. They are mostly about what the society thinks. As a society, we are progressing and becoming much more liberal year after year. But topics such as abortion still remain a very sensitive topic, and that is why even the very progressive people in India would not really favor something like abortion. As you can see in this study, between 2014 and 2021, in India, about 2% people changed their views about abortion and they thought that abortion should be permitted. So, the changes in the mindset that we are seeing in India is at a very slow pace. Not just this, if you see countries such as UK, France, which are supposedly developed nations and are supposed to be much more liberal, in these nations, in fact, the number of people who support abortion are actually declining. So there's a very interesting trend that we are seeing here. Let's not assume that in all the developed or democratic or liberal nations, people would support abortion and it would be vice versa in other nations. Because as you can see, the situation might be very different depending upon what the people of that country personally think. Now, as I said earlier, we do have since 1971 the law about abortion, which has made it legal in India to have it. However, there are still many problems. Let me give you a few examples. In 2017, the Supreme Court of India refused to give permission to a 10-year-old school girl who was a rape survivor from Chandigarh. She obviously wanted to abort the child. She was in her 32nd week of pregnancy. The Supreme Court said, no, we cannot allow you to abort the pregnancy and force the girl to give birth to a baby girl. The Supreme Court said that the medical reports say that it would be dangerous for your own life. On the other hand, in Delhi, the Delhi High Court in 2018 allowed a 16-year-old rape survivor to abort the child when she was 22 weeks pregnant. Now, don't be confused. She had to go to the Delhi High Court even when she was 22 weeks pregnant because it is in 2018. The law was changed in 2021 and now You do not need to go to the court if your pregnancy is within 24 weeks, and just by taking advice of the medical practitioner, you can go ahead with abortion. But this is just to highlight how, on a case by case basis, the destiny of the women in question can be decided by the courts that are involved and not by the women whose body has to carry this child. There are also conflicts in the laws. As I said, the POXO Act says that any girl under the age of 18, if she becomes pregnant, it has to be reported to the authorities. Now, this goes against the right to privacy, and that is why there's a contradiction in between these laws. The harsh reality is that between 45 to 47% of girls get married in India under the age of 18, meaning that it may be a situation where a girl is below the age of 18 years and she has become pregnant within the marriage and she wants to come and abort the child. Even in that case, the case will be reported to the authorities. Thus, we have to consider such situations and make specific changes in the law of abortion in India. The next article that we have here is bringing a very interesting point of view. As per the authors, not all the exports that we do from our country are actually good for the country. A few months back, I did discuss this issue with you, and let me refresh your memory. So, for example, India produces a lot of rice. States such as Punjab, Haryana, Western UP, West Bengal, we have a lot of rice cultivation. As a result of this, because it is in surplus, we export a lot of rice. Now, when we are exporting rice, obviously we are earning precious foreign exchange. But the problem is, rice, for example, is a water intensive crop. So, for growing of rice, we actually took out a lot of our groundwater, fed this water to the rice, and then we exported it to some other country. That means when we are exporting rice, we are not just exporting rice, we are also exporting our precious groundwater resources. And what the developed nations are doing is they can also grow rice, but they would rather prefer just giving some money to India or some other developing nation and not exhaust their own water resources. That is when our own exports can be very dangerous for us in the long run. And this is not just about the agricultural exports. Let's talk about coal. There are many nations across the world that might have their own coal reserves, but they don't want to extract that because they know that extracting coal would mean a lot of disturbance in the environment, a lot of pollution, and that is why they rather prefer paying a developing nation to buy their coal so that they don't have to deal with all the pollution and environmental issues. That is why not all the exports are beneficial for the exporting nations. That is why you see nations such as India have a trade surplus with a lot of developed nations. Not necessarily because the developed nations can't produce this stuff on their own, but they don't want to take the headache of dealing with pollution and other kind of resources. They don't want to do this, and that is why they rather prefer paying the money to a developing nation and taking advantage of their resources. In fact, there is a specific phrase for these products called carbon emissions embodied products, means products which were made or extracted which led to a lot of carbon emissions and then they were exported to other nations. In fact, as per the OECD, India is one of the leading exporters of carbon emissions embodied products, and the trend is increasing because the developed nations have found this trick that they don't want to compromise on their environment and they would rather pay the money to a developing nation. Over the past few years, we have seen with India exporting a lot more. We are actually exporting a lot of these products which were emitting carbon in India. For example, India is home to some of the largest oil refineries in the entire world. Now, these oil refineries emit a lot of pollution. And then what do? We pass on this fresh and ready to use petrol and other types of oil to other nations. So pollution is ours and the finished product is theirs. That is the point that the author is making here. Most developed nations are net importers of polluted products which are produced elsewhere. That can be in the field of agriculture, food. Other example can be water intensive crops such as rice, etc., which has led to a deterioration of groundwater level in India at a very fast pace. Now, this is a graph that shows you the case with different nations. That is, how much is the demand in India and how much is the production that we have. For example, the demand that we have of rice or any other product that will consume a lot of water is much lesser in India as compared to the quantity that we are producing. Why? Because we will then export it to nations such as US, EU, etc., which are happy to pay us the money. We think that it is in our interest, but in the long run, it is actually in the interest of the developed nations because they are preserving the environment at our cost. Over here, there's a very interesting phrase that I would like to introduce for you. This is called pollution haven. Now, you might have heard about tax haven, smaller nations where the companies invest so that they can save on their taxes. Similarly, there are pollution havens, meaning that developed nations now are on a lookout for developing nations where they can set up those kind of factories where there will be a lot of pollution for these activities so that they can have the finished product but they don't want to pollute the environment. They specifically look for these smaller nations which don't have very strict environmental regulations, which are happy to take dollars or euros or pounds from the rich nations, and they are happy to bear the brunt of pollution because for them getting this precious foreign exchange is much more important. This is the concept of pollution haven. That is, the smaller nations get all this pollution while the developed nations are happy to pay them the money. Let me give you a real life example. In US, for example, millions and millions of batteries are recycled, and what they do is they send these batteries to Mexico. Now they say that in these batteries you can extract a lot of precious elements and then you can use to recycle it and we'll pay you the money also. But the reason why US is not doing it is because it is very harmful for the environment. US has very strict environmental pollution agency norms, and that is why they can't extract lead from these kind of batteries, so they export it to Mexico. Thus, Mexico is actually becoming a pollution haven for the US batteries because Mexico's laws with respect to environment are not that strict. New York Times in 2011 said that 20% of spent American vehicles and industrial batteries are exported to Mexico, which is increasing year on year because it was only 6% in 2007. It is being seen by Mexico and other nations as valuable trash that they can then sell it and recycle it, but the environmental cost is much higher. This is the concept of pollution haven. The next article that we have here is focusing on the different nutritional needs specifically for girls and for adolescent girls. The authors here are saying that the stage of adolescence is very important for both boys and girls, but especially for girls because their bodies are undergoing a lot more changes and they require many more nutrients as compared to those that are needed by boys. And that is why we need to focus much more on the girls if we have to promote the idea of healthy India. The authors here say that the susceptibility of adolescent girls catching anemia is 40%, while for boys it is only 18%. The National Family Health Survey said that there has been an increase in the number of children that have anemia in India, especially amongst the girls. Now, the stage of adolescence, which is usually 14 to 18 years, is a very important stage because at this stage, if you provide the body with the required nutrients, it will be very beneficial for them in the long run. Also, if the body lacks certain nutrients because of the lack of good food in the initial stage of his or her life, that can also be corrected at the adolescence stage. And that is why we need to be very careful. Now, the government of India does run certain programs. For example, at Anganwadis, in schools also, the government does provide weekly iron supplements under the weekly iron folic acid supplement scheme. But that is not found to be enough. Also, because most of these government's efforts are focused around school, what we saw was that when the COVID-19 pandemic hit, during the lockdown, since a lot of schools were actually closed, this supply chain of these nutrients and supplements was disrupted very badly. And the government has to find an alternative for that. The authors say that although this weekly supplement program is now going on, but this is not enough. We also have to focus on ensuring diverse diet for the adolescents and ensuring good physical activities. The government must ensure home visits and virtual counseling through the experts for these adolescents. Also, as I said, we need to think beyond the schools because just depending on schools and thinking that every child will come to school every single day is not enough. We have to reach the homes of these adolescents and not just depend on the schools. Not just this, the government also has to side by side work on ensuring that there is proper education infrastructure and other reforms that are introduced. A good example is increasing the legal age of marriage for women in India from 18 to 21 years. Along with that, if we have to make sure that this becomes a success, we have to make sure that from 18 to 21, these girls are actually a part of our education system and are making a future for themselves. We also have to tackle the problem of hidden hunger. Hidden hunger means when the body is not hungry, but the body does lack certain very, very important nutrients, such as vitamin B12, vitamin D, zinc, which are needed in very, very small quantities. That is why they are called micronutrients. But if we don't have these in our body, it will be very, very dangerous in the long run. A good example of what the government is actually doing right now is Mission Poshan 2.0, under which the government is ensuring that healthcare facilities are provided and are available to adolescents and children in India. As per the authors, this needs to be strengthened even more. Let me give you a few more details about this Mission 2.0 beyond this particular article. Now, this Mission Poshan 2.0 actually covers a lot of government schemes in the field of health and nutrition, including the Anganwadi services, Poshan Abhiyan, the scheme for adolescent girls, etc. It was announced first in the Union Budget of 2021-22, and the main focus was to ensure nutritional content, delivery, outreach, outcome, and overall nurturing the health of the youth. As you know, until we have a youth that is healthy, ready to work, that is physically and mentally stable, we cannot expect them to contribute to the country's GDP in the long run. That is why an indirect way of ensuring that we have a good GDP growth in the future is to focus on the health of the individual right now. Under the Mission Poshan, we also celebrate the Poshan Maha. In Hindi, the word Maha means month, where the authorities will focus on improving nutritional outcome for children, pregnant women, adolescent girls, etc. The problem of malnutrition is very, very old in India, although the situation is increasing every single year, but we suffered a major setback during the COVID-19 pandemic. As per the 2010 World Bank report, India suffered an economic loss of 24,000 crore rupees due to the lack of toilets. Why? Because due to the lack of toilets, a lot of women don't join the workforce. In fact, if you remember, a few months back, there was a very interesting lecture given by the Chief Justice of India in which he lamented the fact that in the lower judiciaries across the country, in many of the courts, we don't even have female toilets. So, how can you expect female lawyers or female clerks to work in such places? That is a situation which is true in offices across the country, especially in public offices. And it forces the women not to go ahead and be a part of the workforce. So, just having enough public toilets for women specifically can also have an impact on the overall GDP of the country. The next article is about the US Taiwan relations. A couple of days back, we discussed the fact that the US President Joe Biden, when he was in Japan for the Quad Summit, made a statement. In fact, the statement was not really from his side. He was actually asked a question by one of the audience members that would the US come to the help of Taiwan if China attacks it. Joe Biden, the US president, said yes, we will defend Taiwan if that kind of an aggression takes place. Now, a lot has been discussed about that statement. A lot of people, in fact, said that this was a mistake, or maybe it was a slip of tongue from the US president, because historically, US has been very careful about speaking anything on the Taiwan issue. However, the interesting part is, ever since Joe Biden has become the US president, this is the third time that he's saying the same thing. That is, that we will come to defend Taiwan if China attacks it. So it cannot be a slip of tongue three times. It means that there is a change in the US policy with respect to Taiwan. I told you about the history of Taiwan and China in one of the CNAs just a couple of days back. Just to repeat once again, as we know, China before the Chinese Revolution was ruled by the nationalist party called Kuomintang. In the 1940s, we saw the rise of the Communist Party of China that fought against the Nationalist Party, defeating it, as a result of which the leaders of the Nationalist Party or Kuomintang were forced to flee to a small island south of China called Taiwan. Since then, China has been under control of the Communist Party, while the Nationalist Party has gone on and settled its base in Taiwan. China always believes that Taiwan is a part of our country only, and one day in the future we will reunify it. However, it has not happened. The relationship between China and Taiwan turned out to be even more strenuous during the Cold War, because while China sided with USSR, Taiwan was supported by USA. As you know, USA and USSR were the two opposite sides during the Cold War. However, in 1970s the situation changed, because in 1970s China and USSR did not see eye to eye, because both of their versions of communism were very different from each other. That is when US and China came together and USA changed its policy towards Taiwan. It was in 1972 that the US President Richard Nixon, in fact, visited the People's Republic of China, that is today's China. And then began USA's One China policy that we had discussed, under which USA believes that yes, Taiwan and China are one single country. In the meanwhile, USA has given multiple statements on the Taiwan issue. The three big statements are the Shanghai Communique of 1972, the Normalization Communique of 1979, and the 1982 Communique. The common theme of all these is that yes, we are in favor of Taiwan. We will not interfere in between China and Taiwan as long as China resolves this matter peacefully. US in fact also supplies defensive arms to Taiwan, as we had discussed earlier. But now that China is also showing much more aggression towards Taiwan, USA is also being forced to change its policy stance with respect to Taiwan. Meanwhile, since 1949, China has remained a one party country with the Communist Party deciding everything. Taiwan, on the other hand, has flourished to be a multi party democracy just like most of the Western nations are. So, even the way in which these two countries operate, or these two places operate, China and Taiwan, are very, very different as compared to each other. In Taiwan, their main political party is the Democratic People's Party that has been in power for about 2 decades. Now, what has happened is that China had expected that over the years, because Taiwan is such a small place, it will break down under pressure and it will become a part of China one day or the other. But because that is not happening, and Taiwan has been flourishing, it has been supported by most of the Western nations, it is a very, very rich place right now. China also now is becoming very, very impatient. That is why in the past few years we have seen a lot of rhetoric between Beijing and Taipei. In fact, multiple times the Chinese fighter jets were actually seen flying over the airspace of Taiwan. It has become increasingly frequent now that China sends these planes over Taiwan's air defense identification zone. And these are not just one or two jets, these are jets that come in big numbers, 20 or 30 fighter jets, just to give a message to Taiwan and to other Western nations who are supporting Taiwan. USA has time and time again said that we are in support of Taiwan. We don't want to interfere, but only as long as China does not give a miss to the peaceful methods. And in this context, Joe Biden's statement that we will come to safeguard Taiwan's interests if they are attacked by China become extremely important. The world anyway is right now witnessing a full-fledged war after many, many years, and we don't want another war in which China and US go head to head. Now, one very interesting development that happened just a few days back is this. If you go to the official website of the American government, they have a page on US Taiwan relations. Interestingly, for many years, this page always said that Taiwan is a part of China. But now that part has been removed from this statement. Now the statement does not say that Taiwan is a part of China. Although this is a very, very small change, but China obviously noticed it and they were very, very angry and they reverted by saying that this is unacceptable and USA should not do this and should not interfere in our bilateral relations. Also, if you can see, ever since Donald Trump became the president, the defense trade between America and Taiwan has been increasing considerably. You can see the arms sale from US to Taiwan during Donald Trump in 2019-2020 were very, very high as compared to the two previous presidents, that is Barack Obama and George W. Bush. All that is an indication that the situation between China, Taiwan and America is actually not peaceful anymore, and there may be some changes in the status quo which remain to be seen. From Chinese side also, as I said, the number of incursions or the number of illegal entries that China has been making through its military aircrafts over Taiwan has been increasing. As you can see here, the number of Chinese military aircraft flowing over the airspace of Taiwan have increased considerably in the past few months, and that is why China also is giving a signal to USA that if you are increasing your closeness with Taiwan, we are also here watching and we will not ignore this. The next article is about monkeypox, the monkeypox virus about which we had discussed in the big news a few days back. As you know, there have been over 200 monkeypox cases right now from 19 nations across the world, including a lot of European nations such as UK, Spain, and Portugal. The good part is that there has not been any death that is reported. As I discussed earlier, this is not the first time that this disease has come up, but the reason why it is being covered much more by the global media is because now it has entered Europe. And as unfortunate as it may sound, but the reality is that as long as the disease only remains confined to Africa, the world does not really pay much attention to it. It is only when the developed nations or the rich nations are impacted by this, only then we see the global media paying attention to this disease. Now, the good part is that we know a lot of things about this disease right now. Although we don't have a specific vaccine for monkeypox, but the good part is that the smallpox vaccine is working effectively for the monkeypox as well. Out of most of the cases that have been seen in European nations, most of them are not from people who travel to these African nations where monkeypox is seen as a usual disease. The other interesting part is that most of the people who are infected by this disease are men who identified themselves as being in a sexual relationship with another man. So this is another point of view that the scientists are researching on as to why is it that this disease is spreading amongst this population specifically. The first case of monkeypox was amongst the monkeys in 1958, while the first case amongst humans was in a small boy in Democratic Republic of Congo in 1970. While the main reservoir of this virus is still not known, but the scientists believe that it is the rodents and non-human primates that are the homes of this virus right now. It is a DNA virus which is different to the COVID-19 pandemic virus because that's a RNA virus. Now, as a DNA virus, the main difference is that the rate of mutation of this virus is lower as compared to the RNA viruses as was seen in COVID. Now, because the rate of mutation is lower, that means the virus is not changing its form in a much faster manner. That presents a good opportunity because if the virus does not change its genome in a very fast manner, that means it gives much more time to scientists to come up with the effective medicine, effective treatment, and effective vaccine. That is what happened in case of COVID also. The main challenge with COVID was that because it was mutating at such a fast pace, we kept on hearing that now there is a new variant of the COVID-19 virus, and the danger was that whether or not the vaccine will apply to the new variant as well. With monkeypox, that is not the case. As I said, there is no specific vaccine for monkeypox, but the smallpox vaccine, which is still in stock in some nations, is working fine on this, and that is being administered to people across the world. Now, this is the present status of the spread of this virus disease as of May 23rd, 2022. As you can see here, the interesting part is the cases have not come from Africa. They are mainly from Europe, US, Canada, or Australia. And that is why, although the cases are very low in number as compared to the other diseases, there has been a much wider coverage of this now. With respect to India also, we have not had any specific certain case of monkeypox virus. But yes, Tamil Nadu government has set the state on high alert for some suspected cases of monkeypox. Whether or not it turns into a reality remains to be seen. These were the articles we wanted to discuss from the Hindu newspaper today. Now a couple of practice questions. Number 1. A robust GDP is built on the foundations of a healthy youth. Comment. Second, what are pollution havens? Is it time for the developed nations to be called out for exporting their waste? Discuss. Both these questions have to be answered within 250 words each. You can leave the answer to these questions using the link given below in the description of the video. On this portal, you can check the answers of other students as well, give feedback so that your answer writing skills improve even further. So don't forget to do that as well. Thank you so much for watching the video.